"Move it, janitor!" The young staffer barely slowed down. He clipped the old man's shoulder, then nudged the mop bucket with his foot. The metal scraped across the tile, hit the wall, and tipped. Dirty water spread in a crooked puddle under the fluorescent lights. The old man didn't speak. He took 2 slow steps back, knelt on one knee, and began gathering the soaked rags one by one. No one helped. No one said a word. 2 interns snickered. One raised a phone. That's when it happened. As he leaned forward, the collar of his faded uniform slipped just enough to expose the back of his neck. Just behind the ear, half hidden beneath sunburned skin, was ink. A trident. A skull. The kind of tattoo you don't find in public databases. The laughter faded. The hallway went still. But the man just kept wiping the floor, silent, and the air felt colder than it had seconds before. The water hadn't fully dried when they walked around him. No one asked if he was okay. No one offered a towel. They just stepped over the trail like it wasn't there. Like he wasn't there. One intern hesitated as he passed, his eyes catching the tattoo still partially exposed behind the old man's ear. He looked quickly away like he'd seen something that wasn't meant for him. Samuel Holloway didn't speak. He never did. He simply rose, straightened the bucket with his boot, and dragged the mop once more through the streak of dirty water. The hallway filled again, heels clicking, doors opening, coffee machines hissing. Laughter filtered in from the council room. But around Holloway, the sound always seemed to mute itself. He reached the memorial wall just past the security checkpoint. A framed photograph hung crooked, 3 Marines lifting a flag under gunfire. The plaque below it read, "Operation Gothic Serpent. No names, no rank, just honor." The frame was dusty. No one had touched it in weeks. He cleaned it with his sleeve, pressed it level with 2 fingers, paused for a breath, then turned away. Behind him, a staffer whispered, "What's with the rituals? It's like he thinks he's still in the service." Another replied, "Maybe he is. In his head." They snickered. One took out his phone and opened the group chat. Janitor Chronicles, Vol. 2. Holloway passed them in silence, heading toward the west stairwell. The elevator opened just as he walked by. 2 aides stepped out, quieting mid-conversation. They didn't nod, didn't smile. Just watched him walk past, eyes drifting to the stain on his collar, the faded patch sewn to the inner lining of his uniform pocket. They saw it, but they didn't understand it. Not yet. He paused by the city seal inlaid on the floor, bronze and black marble, polished once a year. He knelt down, removed a folded cloth from his back pocket, and began to scrub. One of the interns passed by, holding 2 coffees. She slowed, but didn't stop, just stared as he worked, then kept walking. Inside the janitor's closet, every item had its place, bleach bottles arranged by size, gloves folded in sets of 2, mop heads braided to keep their shape. The old clipboard on the door was blank. No one signed anything anymore, but the room was spotless. At 11:12, someone dropped a binder in the council chamber hallway. Papers scattered across the floor. People stepped over them. A man barked into a phone and kicked one page aside with his shoe. When the hallway cleared, Holloway appeared, silent. He crouched, collected each page, smoothed the corners, placed the stack on the assistant's desk, said nothing. The young assistant never saw who returned it, but Barnes did. The security officer leaned back in his chair by the entrance, watching the old man disappear around the corner. He didn't smile, just gave a slow, shallow nod. And Holloway, unseen again, adjusted the strap of his mop cart and continued toward the lobby, where no one ever said good morning. But where, little by little, people had stopped laughing. At 2:03 p.m., the cart wasn't where he left it. It had been moved, rolled halfway down the hallway, brakes released, mop heads unraveling behind it like unraveling respect. Holloway didn't pause. He reached it, rewound the cloth, locked the wheels back into place, and resumed course. But someone had seen it. The intern, Jason, watched from the copy room doorway. He didn't laugh. He didn't film. He just stared. At 2:10, Holloway reached the second-floor conference lounge. He had cleaned it every Tuesday for 3 years, but today, a clipboard hung on the door. Authorized personnel only. Maintenance by request. Inside, through the frosted glass, a young facilities coordinator stood with arms crossed. "I've got it covered, sir," the man called out through the door. "New policy." Holloway stood in silence, then stepped forward. The man opened the door halfway, unsure. "You can't go in," he said, softer now. Holloway looked at him. Calm. Steady. "Then tell your staff to stop bleeding on the tile." The man blinked. Holloway nodded once and walked past him without resistance. No one else said a word. Back on the third floor, Jason opened the photo again. The tattoo was clearer now in the saved image. Sun-bleached lines, a trident over bone. He showed it to an older admin outside HR. "You ever seen this before?" She held the phone for less than a second. "Delete it." "What?" Now. And stop asking questions that don't belong in buildings like this." Her voice was sharp. Too sharp. Jason backed off, but he didn't delete it. At 3:02, Holloway entered the atrium near the west exit. A group of interns were setting up chairs for a press event. No one greeted him. One of them stepped aside just enough for him to pass, like moving a chair for furniture, not a man. As he reached the wall, he noticed a misaligned state seal hanging above the city motto. He climbed a step ladder from his cart, realigned it with both hands, dusted it with his shirt sleeve. One intern whispered, "What's he doing?" Another said, "Probably something no one else will." Jason watched it all. Every movement was practiced. Exact. At 3:17, Holloway entered the elevator. Jason stepped in behind him. The old man didn't look up. The silence was sharp. Then Jason tried. "Sir, that tattoo, I saw it. I wasn't trying to—" Holloway spoke, low and quiet. "There are questions that make a man curious, and there are questions that get a man buried." Jason froze. The elevator opened. Holloway stepped out. Jason didn't follow. And he didn't open that photo again for the rest of the day. It happened in front of everyone. Councilwoman Reyes had just stepped off the podium after an awards presentation in Chamber B. A row of city officials applauded with lukewarm smiles. Interns shuffled behind them, passing around clipboards and certificates. Jason stood to the side, holding a tray of awards for distribution. His palms were sweaty. He adjusted his grip. One envelope slipped, then another. The whole tray tipped forward. Dozens of embossed folders, city seals, signatures, and medals began to fall in slow motion, but they never hit the ground. Holloway caught the tray in midair. One knee bent, left hand forward, right arm stabilizing the weight against his chest. It was flawless. No folders crumpled, no medals shifted. He rose slowly, centered the tray, and handed it back to Jason. "Maintain your grip." That's all he said. The words weren't loud, but they carried. Every head turned. The room fell still, not out of shock, out of uncertainty, like no one was quite sure what they'd just seen. Jason froze. Reyes stared. One of the aides took half a step forward, then stopped. The city manager, who'd mocked Holloway's presence weeks earlier, lowered his eyes. Nobody said, "Thank you." But no one spoke for several long seconds either. Holloway walked away without another word. He returned to the hallway, unhooked his cart from the stairwell, and resumed his rounds. Downstairs, the flags from the event were being boxed up. One was draped awkwardly over a folding chair, creases warped, field of stars upside down. He stopped, refolded it properly, hands precise, thumb pressed along the crease. Triangle over triangle, until only blue remained. He placed it on the table gently, then paused. Jason watched him from the doorway. "I looked it up," the intern said. "The tattoo. The skull and trident." Holloway didn't move. "I still don't know what it means," Jason added. "That's why they use it," Holloway replied, eyes still on the flag. "You don't recognize what's not meant to be found." Jason hesitated. "Were you really—" Holloway turned to face him, calm, sharp. Don't finish that question unless you're ready to carry the answer. Jason swallowed his words. Barnes, posted at the end of the corridor, had seen it all. He didn't speak, just stood straighter, the way men do when they realize they've underestimated someone. That evening, when the last of the guests had left, the building felt heavier somehow. Not quieter, heavier. Like something was walking the halls now that hadn't walked them in years. The hallway was buzzing again. It always did before public ceremonies. Interns balancing bottled water trays, staffers straightening clipboards, someone rehearsing how to introduce the guest of honor without mispronouncing the word decorated. But today, there was a weight in the air. Not nervousness, something else. It started when Barnes stood from his desk, not abruptly, not loud, just stood, posture straight, hand behind his back. "Attention in the building," he said. It wasn't shouted. It didn't need to be. Conversations trailed off. Phones went into pockets. People turned, instinctively aligning their bodies to face the corridor. Rear Admiral Daniel Trent entered the atrium. No announcement, no entourage, just the slow cadence of leather soles against polished floor. He wore full dress uniform, service ribbons in neat rows, a single trident pin over his heart. People expected him to walk toward the podium. He didn't. His eyes locked onto a figure down the hallway. Holloway, mop in hand, kneeling beside the base of a dusty column, polishing a forgotten brass plaque. The Admiral's steps slowed, then stopped. For a breath, everything was still. Even the air seemed to pull back. "Chief Samuel Holloway," Trent said. Holloway looked up, not startled, not confused, just calm, prepared. Trent took 2 steps forward. "You were presumed dead after Operation Ravenhall. Files sealed, names struck. No formal debrief, no medals. Just gone." A ripple of breath moved through the hallway. Jason turned his head sharply from where he was sorting ceremony folders. Aides blinked, as if unsure whether they'd heard correctly. "I read the field notes," Trent continued. 2 men entered. One came back, carrying the other through 3 kilometers of hostiles. That man didn't check in, didn't write a report. He just disappeared. Holloway stood now, still holding the rag in his hand, eyes level. "They told me to vanish," he said softly. "So I did." Trent looked at the janitor cart, then at the man. "This building's floor plan wasn't the first you memorized." He reached into his jacket, pulled out a folded patch, protected in plastic, black on black. He handed it to Holloway and said, voice low but resonant, "You never stopped serving. They just stopped recognizing it." Holloway took the patch, looked at it for a long moment, then folded it in his hand and slid it inside his pocket, like it had always been there. A silence followed. Not empty, charged. People didn't know where to look. Some stared at the floor, others at him. Then Trent turned to the rest of the hallway. "I see some of you have your suits on. I see some of you were getting ready to hand out awards. But the man you've been ignoring all this time?" He motioned to Holloway, just once. "He's the reason you get to wear that badge in the first place." An aide near the water cooler lowered his head. The young coordinator who once blocked Holloway from a room turned red. One staffer quietly stepped out of view. Trent addressed Barnes directly. "Update the internal roster. His name goes on the record, not as janitor, as chief." Barnes nodded, firm. "Yes, sir." The Admiral faced Holloway again. "Some men fade when they leave uniform. Others carry it under their skin." He raised his hand and saluted. This time, no one looked away. Jason stood straighter. One of the interns teared up. A quiet hush rolled down the corridor, not of fear, but reverence. And for the first time in years, Holloway returned the salute, not high, not sharp, just enough, just right. And everyone there, everyone, understood they'd been in the presence of a man they hadn't deserved, not until that moment. If you believe dignity always finds its voice, even in silence, subscribe now. It's how we remember what must never be forgotten. By the following morning, the plaque was already on the wall. No ceremony, no unveiling, Just 5 brushed metal words, bolted between the council chamber and the atrium. Chief Samuel Holloway, still serving it, stood beneath the city seal, where thousands passed every month, where he'd cleaned for years without anyone remembering his name. At 7 a.m., Holloway entered the building as always. No announcement, no change in posture. Same cart, same folded rag, same quiet rhythm of boots on tile. But the hallway didn't sound the same anymore. No laughter behind doors. No quick glances of dismissal. No one pretending he wasn't there. People moved slower now. Not out of caution, but out of recognition. He reached the atrium, mop in hand. The photograph had been installed overnight. A grainy still from internal security footage. Rear Admiral Daniel Trent, hand to brow, saluting the man with the mop. No caption. No title, just that image. People stopped in front of it now. They didn't speak. They just stood there and understood. At 9:30, Barnes handed Holloway a plain envelope. Inside, a new badge, black, embossed. No title, just his name and one line below. Service record, classified. No fanfare. But everyone knew. Later that day, Jason approached him by the stairwell. He stood there for a moment, nervous. I'm supposed to give you this, he said, offering a folded piece of paper. It was a reprint of the intern schedule. The final line had been added in bold. Respect is not optional. Holloway read it, then looked at the boy. Jason hesitated, then spoke again, voice low. I didn't know. I mean, what you did, who you were. Holloway's response was quiet. Unshakable. It doesn't matter who I was. It matters what you do. After. Jason nodded, swallowed hard, and walked away straighter than he'd come. That afternoon, as the sun dipped below the high atrium glass, the building took on a glow it hadn't known before. Quiet. Warm. Still. Holloway passed through the hallway with his cart. Staffers stepped aside without being asked. One of the senior aides gave a short nod. 2 interns stood up when he entered the room. He said nothing. He expected nothing. And yet the room, every time now, seemed to rise slightly when he entered. At 4:12 p.m., he entered the utility room. He removed his gloves, folded them flat, hung the rag back on its hook. Then, for the first time, he opened a locker no one had ever seen him touch. Inside were only 3 things: a folded American flag, a worn Navy Challenge coin, and a photo, yellowed, faded, of 3 men standing in a desert. Only one of them returned. He didn't linger, just looked, closed the door. That evening he left 5 minutes later than usual. The building was empty, but the hallway lights stayed on, as if the place itself had learned to watch over him now. When he passed the plaque, he paused. Not for long, just enough. He adjusted the alignment by a few millimeters, straightened the edges with 2 fingers, then stepped back. From behind a corner, someone whispered, "He never asked for recognition." Another voice responded, "That's why he deserves it. If you typed dignity earlier, thank you. If you subscribed, welcome. And if this story moved you in any way, remember this. We stand together even in silence. See you in the next one.